Gilbert Garcia is the Metro columnist for the San Antonio Express News. Brendan Gibbons, the environmental reporter for the Rivard Report, join us now, and the conversation continues. Gilbert, last legislative session, Lyle Larson, veteran state representative from San Antonio, former councilman and commissioner, was pretty much marginalized by Governor Abbott because he dared introduce ethics laws that Governor Abbott didn't care for.
That's right.
There apparently is a kind of a meeting of the minds between the two. Talk about where we stand with that.
Well, last week, Lyle Larson posted something on Facebook and on Twitter, a photo of him shaking hands, smiling with the governors, and talking about how they had buried the hatchet and they had a great conversation. And this was big news because, as you pointed out, I mean, there has been a real feud going on between them. And in 2017, Lyle Larson introduced a bill that it was an ethics reform bill because he had expressed concerns about what he saw as a pay-to-play situation with the governor giving major board and commission appointments to people who've been giving him big contributions. Greg Abbott was very unhappy about that, and he targeted Lyle Larson. That was one of three Republican legislators that he targeted in 2018 by supporting their primary opponents. And so he gave close to $136,000 to Lyle Larson's Republican primary opponent, who was the then mayor of Hollywood Park, Chris Fales. Lyle Larson won anyway, and two of the three races where Greg Abbott went after Republican incumbents, those incumbents won anyway. And there was some sense that his gambit had failed, and he hasn't made any public criticisms of Lyle Larson since then. And so we're in the early stages of this, but it looks like on both sides there's been a willingness to put aside what happened in 2018. And I guess the question is whether Greg Abbott will, from this point on, decide that he's not going to support any the primary opponents for Lyle Larson.
Well, Lyle Larson's not the best person for a Republican governor to take on. He's always been immensely popular here in San Antonio and Bexar County. As you mentioned, his attempt to get him unseated, I would think that the governor should have understood from the start that that was a fool's errand, and it would end up making him look weak.
Well, and one of the things was, he did ads describing Lyle Larson as liberal Lyle. And people who remember, when Lyle Larson was on the commissioner's court, I think they got a pay raise to a little over $108,000, and he insisted on staying at $48,000 because it bothered him so much to have the county spending that extra money. When he ran for Congress, he came out, in support of eliminating the income tax. I mean, there are many things people could say about Lyle Larson, but liberal is not the first, description that people would apply to it.
Brendan, you've been writing extensively and very interestingly about this new deal between SAWS and a development in Kendall County. What does that indicate for the future? Does it indicate to you that SAWS is going to attempt to become the water purveyor for the region?
That is a great question. Here's the common thread with Lyle Larson, is that Lyle Larson has been a proponent of what he's called, in the past at least, what he's called a hydrovascular network of water throughout the state. Water is a major, just something he's just fascinated by. We don't really have a system that a lot of other states have in Texas where there's a water grid. There's, of course, a power grid that we're all familiar with, but there's not really a way to move water long distances from where it's abundant to where it's scarce in Texas. And in the absence of that, you have developers who will go out and form their own small water utilities where they go out and try to find any sort of water source they can find in the area. A lot of times it comes from groundwater. You have different river authorities and water agencies that are going out selling water to different entities, but increasingly it's looking like San Antonio is becoming a regional water hub, and that's kind of the big question that faces SAWS. And last year they had to talk about this in one of their board meetings. Are we going to become more of a water exporter? Are we going to become that regional water purveyor? And the chair of the, Berto Guerra, the chair of the SAWS board, said that there's many different opinions within SAWS, within the city council, should we be that or not. But I will say, once we get this Vista Ridge pipeline coming from east of Austin to San Antonio, SAWS has tapped into every major water supply source already in the Bexar County area. They're also seeking a permit that would allow them to consider the water that's discharged from San Antonio in the San Antonio River to be SAWS water all the way down to the coast. So that essentially means you've got a flowing river of San Antonio water rights that goes from east of Austin into San Antonio and all the way down to the coast, if all of that stuff comes to fruition. And so that kind of makes us the spine of a regional water hub that goes down the I-35 corridor and to the coast. So big questions that San Antonio really needs to grapple with. Is the city water utility going to be this like major spoke in the wheel of where water comes from and goes to?
Now, one thing I think that ratepayers are concerned about is that we're paying for the Vista Ridge project to bring a large number of water here from Burleson County. And that was sold to us on the basis of this is guaranteeing our water future, our industrial future, making sure we won't dry up the next time we have the same kind of drought we had in the early part of this decade. But now the waters that we're paying for is being used so SAWS can sell it to somebody else at a profit. And that kind of bothers ratepayers, I think, to a certain extent.
They have said that that whether they're selling Edwards water outside of their typical boundaries or whether they're selling Vista Ridge water, it's going to be sold at the same price. They really want to avoid the perception that they're going to take our relatively inexpensive Edwards water and sell it for a profit. But that kind of thing is up to the decision of future city council members who would approve these wholesale water sales agreements. And yeah, that exactly what you mentioned. It sticks in the craw of a lot of ratepayers who don't want to see their bills go up, 50% over a 5-year period. That's almost, we're about to get the biggest bill increase for the water supply component in next year's bill increase. It could be as high as around like above 9%. To just go and turn around and sell this to someone else in the short term at least. But, again, the assurance from backers of Vista Ridge and SAWS is that we need this water decades in the future, and it makes sense to buy tomorrow's water at today's prices.
And then we can sell it later if we end up having a surplus. Brendan Gibbons, thank you, the environmental reporter for the Rivard Report. Gilbert Garcia, Metro columnist for the San Antonio Express News. As always, thank you both for joining us on The Conversation Continues.